Okay, so what I want to do is I want to show you again about slabbing. So I'm going to be redirecting the computer down towards my base, and you'll see what I've got. So if you take a look, what I've got here, I've been taking a piece of clay, and I've been using a jar to help roll it out. So when you're slabbing, first thing you want to do is make sure your clay is rolled out. Jar works good. Piece of dowel works good, or just even pressing with your hands works pretty good. The main thing is that you're trying to get even consistency. Okay, so I've got a piece of clay rolled out. I've got pretty good consistency. Okay, now I want to create a plaque for myself. So I need to create a shape that I want to make it in. And then I'm going to be joining letters on it. So I'm going to grab a ruler. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece that is going to be the shape of my plaque. So I'm going to cut a straight line, and I'm using the plastic knife as a clay knife. Any pieces that you get cut off, save them, don't throw them away. So I've got a section here. Okay. I'm going to save these pieces rolled out. Those are actually going to become letters for me, which I'm going to work with. Now I've got a plaque. I can decide are the ends going to be rounded or what are they going to be. In this case, I'm going to make rounded ends. So I'm using the end of my jar, and I'm going to round the ends. Same thing over here. I'm going to get it even, and I'm going to round the end. So there it is. So now that's my plaque. Now, because I put a jar on top of it, I've got some marks in here. If I don't want to see those marks, I can either put some slip on it or I can flip it over. I've got a smooth side, so I'm flipping it over. So now what I want to do is I want to decide what I'm going to put on this. And what I've decided that I'm going to do is I'm going to start with letters. So the first thing with this is that it's going to say something on it, okay? I'm going to start by doing a letter. I'm going to probably work maybe with my name, my first initial, last initial. I think I'm going to do my 3 initials. So the first thing I want to do is I want to sketch out my letters. So I'm using this knife, and I'm very gently sketching out a letter. And once I've got it sketched out, I know how big it's going to be. I'm then going to cut the letter out. So what I've done, I'm going to hold this up so you can see, I've sketched out a letter S. Now, I can cut it out with the knife, but a good thing to do is if you use a pin tool, that instead of having one of the long ones, I use a paper clip. And a paper clip works great. It will act like a pin tool. So I can open up the paper clip like that, and now I can cut with it. And especially something like a letter that's got curves to it, it's kind of hard. So you can see I've used that to cut that part. Now I'm going to cut around it. And I'm just using the paper clip like a pin tool. And I'm saving all my pieces. So once I get my letter cut the way that I want, I can then clean it up. I've got it about like that. So now I'm going to get in there. I'm going to kind of clean that up a little bit. Where I want a little more detail or something, I can get in there. I can clean stuff up with the paper clip. I can also shape it with my fingers if I want to. The main thing that we're trying to do is whatever I'm doing here, I'm going to build up and I'm going to add on to the plaque. So I've got a bigger area. Now I'm going to use the back of this knife. And I'm just clearing out to make sure that that looks good. And I can also take the knife, I can go inside and I can shape it so that I get the way that I want the letters to look. Okay, so there's that letter. Now, it's going to get joined onto this. So how does it get joined on? I decide where it's going to go. I place it like that. And then I mark around it with either the paper clip or mark around it with a knife, just where it's going to go. You're not going to go too deep. So I'm going to get, again, I'm going to put it where I want it. Now I'm going to mark around it, just lightly. Okay. So what I've done, it's very hard to see, but there are tiny little marks all around here where it's going to go. Therefore, I know where I'm going to be scoring. I have to score the back of this. You can use the pin tool. You can use the end of the knife. You can use a plastic fork. You can score with the plastic fork if you want. And then where it's going to go on the actual plaque itself, I'm going to score here too. And I can see where I made my marks. So I'm making some scoring shapes. Little X's, they work good. So now what I've done is I've scored this. I have scored the back of the letter, and it's going to be fitting on like that. But before that goes together, you have to slip the two of them together. So you put slip on the back here and slip on the back here. I have a container that I've kept some slip going in. Okay, so I'm going to use some of that. So I'm just going to grab my knife. The slip is very thin, kind of like pudding. If you keep it in a container like that, it's going to be nice and thin. Otherwise, if it's a little thick, you can use water. Like I said, just take some water across the back and it will also work. So I've got both sections slipped. Now I got to put them together. Anytime you score and slip something, the scoring acts like a zipper in a coat, and the slip acts like glue. So it's kind of like gluing a zipper closed. So once I put it on like that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put pressure on this. So here it is down here. Let me get it back into the center of the camera so you can see. So I'm now pushing pressure on it with my fingers. That's going to make sure that it holds well. If I get any extra slip sticking out around the edges, I can use my knife. I can get in there and I can smooth it in. I can also take a little slip on my fingers and I can smooth the top of the letter. If the letter got like marks in it that I didn't want, I can smooth it out too.
Mr. Belly, I'll be right back. I'm going to the bathroom.
Okay. So that is there. Okay. Now that should not fall off. If I pick this up and I've done it right and I turn it upside down, it should not fall off. It's not falling off. That's good. All right. So in writing, one thing is putting pieces on top of like this. The other thing is if you decide to write on this and you want to write into the pieces, you want to do it in such a way that you don't go very deep. So let me show you what I mean on here. Say, for example, that's going to be my only raised letter. And I'm going to do the rest of my initials. I'm going to do them in script, and I'm going to carve them into this, okay? When you are working, I'm going to do a letter H. I'm going to just draw it out on here quickly. Okay, so I made a letter H on there. Now, if I'm carving that in, I don't want to go too deep. That's not too deep, okay? I just put medium pressure on it with the paper clip. If I was to do it like this, let me show you. And I've carved it in like that. When this dries, what's going to happen is it's going to open because it's carved so deep, it's almost cut. It'll crack and it'll probably fall apart. So you don't want to carve in deep. It's always a good idea to do the lines lightly and then using some slip, the edge of the paper clip or the edge of the knife, make dents. And you're not actually going very, very deep. So in the letter H here, I'm making dents in it, and I'm taking some of the clay away with the paper clip, putting it in the slip, and I can come back in. The idea being, those are dents that aren't going to break. That's too deep. That's too deep a cut, okay? So I'm going to put the H in the middle, and then the B is going to be done otherwise. So I'm using the back of the paper clip, and I can actually take away some of the clay with the paper clip. It'll actually take it out. And I can come back in, I can wet the paper clip, some slip. I can make sure that the dents look good. I can use the back end of the fork or the knife to make sure that it looks nice the way that I want it to be. The idea being is that it's carved in. So I'm using the back of the fork to kind of check things. I can wet it with slip. Okay. And the main thing I don't want to have is I don't want to have a lot of little pieces of clay, like balls of clay sticking up. Like I got little pieces like this. I want to get rid of those. I've got a little piece in here I want to get rid of. And again, I can use the back of a paper clip and I can smooth stuff out. I can scrape things out with it, but clear the paper clip. I can scrape some more out, clear the paper clip. The main thing is I'm making dents. I'm not making deep cuts. So there's the S and there's an H. The next letter I'm going to put on is a B and it would go there. So the principle of this is, number one, don't go to work and carve too deep. It'll crack. When you cut a letter out, you score and slip both places where it's going to go. So what you want to do is your plaque should say something. That's the whole idea. It should say something. If you have pieces of clay and you want to join them together because you've got pieces, let me show you about joining clay together. Here I've got two pieces of clay. I want to join them together and turn it into a bigger piece of clay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel. To bevel it, what you do is you take the knife and you cut the top edge off. So I'm going to bevel this. And I'm going to save my pieces because they can be used. So all my little pieces I'm going to save. And now I'm going to bevel the other one. Same thing. We're sloping the clay. Okay, and I'm going to show you. You can see how the clay has been sloped. The two slopes are going to fit together like that, like a puzzle piece. So now I'm going to score the slopes, the parts that are cut. So that's now scored, both of them. They're going to go together like that. I'm going to take some slip, and I'm going to slip both sections. Now I'm going to put the pieces together, and I'm going to press them. And I want to make sure my line disappears. Okay, I'm going to pick it up. So you can see there's the original line, and I'm covering it. I'm pulling it together. Putting pressure on it, pressure down, and pressure this way. Once it's done on one side, you feel it's pretty well joined, flip it over, check the other side, do the same thing. Just make sure that it's pushed together well, good pressure, okay? And once you've done that, that piece of clay can now be cut. It's now joined together as one piece. Sometimes when I do that, I also will take like a rolling pin or a jar, and I might roll on it a little bit. This is a little damp because I've got a lot of slip on it, so I'm trying to be careful. And if I end up with any cuts or breaks like that, I can take a little bit of slip and I can push the breaks together and press it in. So now that piece of clay is now joined. I could draw a big letter in there. I need a letter B, for example. I could draw it in here and cut it out. So let me show you another one. This was done earlier in the week. There's one that I did, the letter B on it. And as you can see, I actually used the fork to make a pattern around it. So that's the other thing. You can make patterns in this. I could take the back of the fork, I could press it in, I could find other things to press in, and I can make patterns. So this one is square with a pattern in the corners. This one is plain, no pattern in the corners, but I'm doing two different styles of lettering. I've got the raised, I've got the incised or carved in, and then there's going to be another one raised. This one's going to end up being all raised letters. So I have to do the rest of my name all raised, okay? So just keep in mind, if you have pieces of clay that are getting dry, okay? Question was asked about this. I have a piece of plastic wrap here, and I have some pieces of clay that are starting to get dry. I'm going to take a little bit of water. In this case, it's slip, and I'm going to put a little bit of it on the plastic. Okay, there we go. Now I'm taking my dried pieces of clay that aren't really real soft, but they're, you know, they're not bone dry. They're just need to be softened up. Put them in the slip like that. wrap the plastic around them tight, and just leave it. Leave it like that as a package. And when you would come back to that later on today or tomorrow, the clay is going to be a lot softer. And then when you unwrap it, this is what you do. And just, let's assume this is sat for 24 hours. I'm picking it up. And now what I want to do is I want to work the pieces together. I take them right off the plastic, go onto my working surface, and I'm finishing working the water into the clay. You can see how wet that is. I'm just working the water, the slip back into the clay. And if it feels like it's too soft to work with, okay, you can see how much liquid is right there. If it's too soft to work with, just put it off to the side for a few minutes, flatten it out. In this case, I'm just flattening it out with my thumbs. Put it off to the side and let it dry for a few minutes. As it evaporates, the clay itself is gonna get tighter, okay? Also, this cloth also takes some moisture out of the clay. So remember, if you want pieces, just wrap it up, okay? I'm saving all my pieces that I've got here. I've got a good chunk of clay. I'm gonna add this to it, press it in, because this is gonna get wrapped up. And this piece of clay is gonna actually need some water because it's starting to feel a little stiff. And I've got some more that I'm gonna add to it. So that's basically the process of slabbing. So what you're gonna do is create a slab that has your name on it, okay? That's the process, or it says something, and we'll be good to go. All right, great. And I am gonna bring my piece back up, and we will be done.
Does it have to be words or can it be shapes too? Like only shapes?